Hello, everyone. Nancy Taylor here with another interview. I'm so excited to introduce you to my friend. This is Ceri, like the phone. She introduced me. So if your phone just popped up with that, we were just chatting about that. But it's Ceri Payne, and she's a life coach, a business coach for women. And would you give us a little bit of an intro, a little bit of a backstory on who you are?
Hi, thanks for having me, Nancy. I'm excited for this. So as you mentioned, Siri, yep, like the iPhone. I have three teenage daughters. I have been married for 24 years. I am a certified life, business, and executive coach, and I coach women entrepreneurs. I guest podcast and speak at retreats and conferences and summits and all that kind of stuff. Back in 2014, I like to say I was the first online teacher before it was normal. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but I was an online school teacher for our current district. And it was in about 2018. I kind of got a little bored during one of the summers. And so I thought, hey, why not go certify as a life coach? And at that time, I originally thought that I would coach parents with children that have like special needs. But as I was growing that business, I was teaching full time. I was working my business towards a six-figure salary. I was also, I had my daughters and my husband, and then I was serving as the president of my church's women's organization. And so that's when other entrepreneurs, other coaches, other people in the online field started to like ask me, like, what am I doing to manage my time? How am I balancing all? How am I growing my business? And so that's kind of where it evolved and how I really help women grow successful businesses while balancing the demands of life. And I also do a little bit of COO and fractional project management work as well.
Awesome. Isn't that amazing? I'm like, can I just have your resume? And when you started, okay, you're teaching online. I started teaching online in 2015. So it's fun to hear that you started 2014. And I feel like that was when we pioneered it. It was like, it's a new thing. Now it's everywhere. But when
Yes.
you started, and you said you certified as a life coach in 2018,
Uh-huh.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah, when you certified and you are balancing, this is a topic I coach on a lot is I'm doing all these different things. I have my all these different plates I'm spinning, and that kind of became your expertise. Yes, is I was able to build the business while still doing these other things, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So when you're doing, you said I go and do speaking. I also have my own coaching, and you're doing that full time, right? Is coaching and also doing COO work. Is that what you said?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. How did you transition to do that? How did you transition from teaching to going all in on your business? Like, what did that look like?
That's a great question. So that first year I did both, right? I started my business and I taught. And the second year it was the summer and I thought I still can do both. But really just out of, maybe it sounds cliche, but just a lot of like going inside, intuition, thinking about it, prayer, it just really felt like I should probably just spend my time in one direction. And so that's when, and what I tell people, I wasn't quite making my teacher salary at that time, but I didn't have any more time to grow the business. And so I think that when we do both, we should really, make money in one area so that we don't add extra stress to our business or extra stress to our finances. So try to do both for as long as it seems kind of feasible. But eventually when you get to that, like that sweet spot or that balance part, it's like, in order to make more money in one business, I have to give up something. I have to have more time. And so that's during that summer, I just kind of decided that it's probably time. And so even though, again, I wasn't quite making my teacher salary, I just believed that I could if I had more time. And that's exactly what happened.
So you went all in on the business. And then you said I also do speaking. I'm a guest on podcast. How did that happen? Was it organic? Did you go and seek out speaking opportunities? I'm just curious for those that perhaps they want to market in the same way.
That's a good question. It was actually part of my business strategy. So in 2019, when I was no longer teaching anymore, so I had a little bit more time for my business, I decided to create one of my marketing plans was to grow to six figures without investing in Facebook ads or paying, investing money in my business. So because of that, I chose to pitch myself with podcasts or retreats and summits and things like that. So it definitely was very intentional. And it's something that I did personally. I created a little structure and a little flow chart and kind of followed that so that I could appear. I just said in front of someone else's audience twice a month. So whether it was a podcast or a YouTube or a summit or conference or whatever it was. So that was definitely something intentional that I chose to do.
Oh, Wow, that's helpful to hear that that was chosen as a marketing strategy. And you said twice a month. When you say I would pitch myself, is that an email? Do you follow up? Is there just like a little bit more that we could hear about that strategy? Would you be willing to share?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, it was an email. That's what I did. One thing that was a strategy for me, and it could be different for other people, was that I actually pitched myself. So I did not use a VA. I get pitched a lot to be on my podcast, which I don't have one, but people, think I do because I appear on a lot. And it's just from someone's like virtual assistant, and it's not very personable. So that's one of the first things is I chose to do that myself. I'm not saying that you couldn't get a virtual assistant to make it very sound like you, right? And to sound very authentic. But that's one of the things I did. And that is some of the feedback that I received from some of the, let's say, bigger name podcasts where I probably had no business being on at first, but they just told me that normally they didn't take someone that didn't have like a book to promote or, X amount of followers. But because it was so intentional and so authentic, they really felt connected to me. So when I say pitch myself, I created an email. I just kind of found different podcasts. That was part of like what I did is I would look through different podcasts, see which ones resonated with me. On the app, it will kind of say, hey, if you liked this, here's some other ones that you would like. And I just checked them out. And then I just then went to town figuring out, who was the host, how could I get a hold of them, what was their email. And then I just sent them, it was kind of a canned email, but it was definitely personalized to them. So I kind of followed a structure, a template, but then I put it in exactly how I would want to, how I would want to have someone talk to me if they were wanting to be on my podcast.
Yeah, that's on. Thank you for sharing because I think that that's brilliant. Is not that you're borrowing other people's audiences, but you're offering a ton of value by showing up and teaching, and then they get to learn about you and hear about you and come and potentially be coached by you or be a client of yours, essentially. Is yeah. That's so cool. So let's back it up a little bit. So you transitioned into doing only coaching and going all online. And then how long did that take for it to pass your teaching salary or like when you felt comfortable? Was that a long journey? I'm sure there was a lot of mindset work that you had to do, but that's kind of like a little bit risky, it feels like, when you're making that decision of I have no more time that I can dedicate to both of these. I'm going to pick this. Like how long did this take to really sustain itself, I guess? I don't know what the word is.
I both love and hate this question because it took me a year. I made six figures that first year that I was full time. So the first year I wasn't quite full time, and then the first whole year that I was full time. So it wasn't like January to January. It was like August to August that I wasn't teaching. It took that long for me to create a six-figure salary. So which was more than a teaching salary for sure.
Yeah, that's amazing. And what would you say you did to hold yourself accountable? Because a lot of times for me and for those I coach, it's I had content planned, or for you, I had these two podcasts that I was going to reach out to. Like, how did you follow up and keep yourself accountable and follow through with making that happen?
I think a lot of, and this might sound like a lame answer or a cliche, but it's just like believing that it was possible, right? Like, because if you don't believe it was possible to get on two podcasts, then you're not going to take the actions or do the actions to make it happen. And so I just believed, and maybe a little bit of his ignorance too, that I'm like, I could do it. I could make a six-figure salary. Like other people are doing it. Why not me? And so that belief, I really think goes a long way because then it's easier to show up and do those actions. But if you don't believe it's going to give you the results you want, then of course, that's when we're not taking the actions that we want to take to grow our business the way we want to grow it.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought it to the belief that it's going to happen because how many times do we fail ahead of time because we're like, they're not going to want me on their podcast? Or who am I to reach out? This happens a lot with YouTube creation, imposter syndrome, and just coming back to if I believe first, and then the actions will follow. And you mentioned a lot of times with building your own business or your brand, sometimes your topic pivots and changes. So you thought you were going to help with special needs parents, correct?
Yeah.
And did you originally start with that topic and that changed, or how did you pivot? How did you find like that sweet spot, what you're an expert in?
Yeah, so I think at the beginning of my business, and this is kind of normal for lots of people, they might go through a lot of different ideas and niches and stuff like that. So about the time that I started to pitch myself, I was pretty confident and knew that I was more of like a time management, organizational kind of structure for moms also growing businesses. Um, but that doesn't mean everything I talked about was always that. At the very beginning, I was just willing to be on any podcast that someone would have. I did set like a boundary. I wanted to make sure they at least had 30 podcasts just to show that they had kind of had some consistency built up. But other than that, I didn't care anymore. And it's just interesting. I talk a lot about priorities. That's how we have enough time. That's how we focus on what's important. That's how we like get everything done. So even if it was a financial podcast, or even if it was like a podcast about teaching kids, or even something about like special education or the IEP, it always kind of goes back to those same core things. So even though I may have like said, oh yeah, I can talk about that thing, which whatever, I don't know, like ADHD, because I coach a lot of women with ADHD, it still kind of comes back to the nuts and bolts of like priorities and belief and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, so true. I tell this to my students. I say every course I've taken, the first module is always mindset or understanding like your why. And I think that it's very easy for us to skip past it and just want the strategies. Okay, just teach me how to make the six-figure business. Just teach me how to be successful. And it's like sometimes you have to just make this the priority, and then that will just happen naturally. So I'm so glad that you keep bringing it to the belief and understanding that first. And I agree. I think that is the first thing, because that's what keeps us paralyzed or stuck or from moving forward a lot of the time. Okay, is there a moment in your business when something went wrong, you failed? I call these learns with the women I coach. Is there a moment that you can share that you learned from that we can learn alongside you?
I love that. I think like when I look at every little piece individually, it's what I was failing at or what I learned was to really trust myself, trust my gut, trust my intuition, whatever you want to call that. But when I would like consider doing something and go forward and it didn't feel like my next best step, or it just didn't feel like the right timing, or for whatever reason, it just didn't feel right, that's when I can kind of pinpoint that I was ignoring the thoughts, right? Ignoring my gut, ignoring my intuition, and I did it anyways. And those seem to be the things that were a flop or a disappointment, or as I like to call, sometimes just a very expensive lesson. We learn a lot about ourselves in that time, but I really feel like it was when I just didn't listen to myself to begin with.
Yeah. So what do you do to listen to yourself? Like, do you have a journaling practice or a strategy that you use that allows you to tune in with yourself?
Yeah, like I think what works for me, I'm pretty creative brained, and so I come up with a lot of fun things to try and ideas. But for me, what happens is when it sort of fizzles out. When I say creative, I mean I am creative. I don't want to give myself a bad rap, but I'm just more of like intentionally like, oh, that would be a good idea. This would help everyone. We should totally do it, kind of thing. But then after a couple of days, it doesn't feel as exciting anymore. And that's for me when I know of like, oh, that's maybe outside of my zone of genius, or that's, someone else can be really good at that. So just, and I think a lot of times as entrepreneurs, we are creative brains and we think, oh, there's all these ways we can help people. But for me, when it just no longer feels exciting kind of quickly, right? I know that when we decide to do it, we get in the nuts and the weeds and the bolts of it all, right? And it feels very daunting. It kind of takes away that excitement. But that's not the excitement I'm talking about. I'm talking about kind of near the beginning. And so that's more when I listen to myself, when it just is like, oh, that sounded fun yesterday, but it doesn't feel like it's cool or exciting. And I don't have like all these ideas still floating and coming. Then that's usually when I'm like, okay, that's for someone else to do, or a great idea, but maybe I'll postpone it.
Oh, I like that because a lot of times we'll hear from the experts or someone else tells me I need to use this strategy or do it this way, or people are asking me about the specific topic. So I think I need to do that. But that's when you've seen the failures, like you didn't have your heart in it. And so that makes sense why you didn't have the drive and the desire to continue moving forward. I like that. And a lot of those that I coach, I know I've talked about, they're multi-passionate and have a lot of things going on. And it sounds like that's something that's common with those that you coach. How do you help them to better I've heard this before. They talk about time management, but someone said it's more of focus management, like managing your focus. So how do you help entrepreneurs, business owners to manage their focus to move the business forward?
Yeah, I love that. I do it in so many ways. Let's see if I can. And when I say so many, they're all connected in back to each other. But some of those tips for like balancing work and life and business, I do say it begins in the mind, right? It's really mind management, which is, the focus. It's first of all just realizing that balance is 100% possible, right? And that's because it is a feeling and it's not something we obtain, right? So lots of times we think like balance looks something, or we get balanced, but really it's just a feeling of feeling balanced. And so one of the things that I like to do is really help them feel balanced is determine their priorities, right? So when we know like our top 5 priorities, and I help women really determine and discover them in their business and like in their motherhood and their life. Like it's not, it's just like you just get 5 for all of it, everything you do. But then we take that a little step further, and to just be very trite about it, it's like the finding the why, right? That they say like, why do you want it to be a priority? But I do it in a little different way than you probably have heard before. But then the most important thing that we take from that, the most important data, is then to define the action steps that they're going to do every day or every week, depending on, like what the priority is. But we define the action steps that support that thing as a priority. And so I limit those to 3. And so that's where they say focused. It's like I keep them focused on those 3 things that really support that priority. So if they're doing those 3 things every day, they're going to get the results that they want in those priorities. And then what I like to share with them is that if something is on their schedule, and I call it a task, an ask, or an idea. So sometimes it's a task that gets on there. Someone asks us to do something, or an idea. It could be our own, right? Like our business, we're like, oh, this would be so cool to do X in our business. But if a task, an ask, or an idea comes up, and it doesn't support and it doesn't complement your priorities, then you just got to be really good at saying no. And that's the focus part, right? Is learning to say no.
Yes. I love that you started it with priorities, because I've heard before that the time management isn't that I'm doing too many things, it's that I'm not focusing on spending my time on my priorities. That's why we get burnt out or feel defeated or overwhelmed. And so to start with the priorities first, and then you said, and I wrote down the notes for this for anyone that wants a review, is then from priorities, then I have action steps. And you said I pick 3. Now, do you pick the priorities in all parts, like business, motherhood? Are there different priorities and then 3 action steps under each?
Yes. Yes. And so because I like to say that life is more than just our business, right? And so they have to complete and complement each other, or else that's when we do get burnt out and we feel unbalanced, right? And
Mhm.
so it's just 5 priorities. So usually it might be, and I don't care what they're in, but I'm going to share with you what they're usually in is like health, relationships, maybe your family. It could be like your faith. It might be like self-learning, development, self-care, something like that, your business, some of those big areas. That's what a priority is in. And then I take the same process though, and we do the same thing in their business, and they get 5 business priorities. But they have to know why they want to grow their business first. And we have to know the deep, kind of sometimes people refer to it the why that makes you cry. But I like to, it's just the why. Like we get so deep into it. It's just like that it becomes so clear that I have to do this thing because of this result, right? And it really does feel very personal. It might make you cry. It just really feels like more of the intuition is speaking rather than just like that, oh, I should grow a business because it would be fun or because I can, which are great reasons. But what's the real reason why that's what you want to do with your time? And so when you figure that out, then we do the same exact process, but I give you 5 in your business so that your business stays very focused as well.
Yeah, that's so helpful, because I think a lot of times as entrepreneurs, we can confuse ourselves, feel overwhelmed because we don't come back to those priorities and have that focus. Would you say there's a common theme for those that you coach for their why? Like, is there a common theme you see, or is everyone kind of different in their own special way? Is there a common, like, this is my why? I think for my own clients, a lot of times it's time freedom, financial freedom, following a passion that they put off, or having permission to do it. Is it kind of similar for you?
I think so. Yeah, they just want some kind of freedom. They want ability to express themselves. Some of them just feel like it's almost like a calling, right? As if like I just have this ideas, I have these skills, I have these talents, and I just really feel like it's part of my responsibility on earth to like share them with other people.
Yeah. Are there any other common topics that you coach on that you'd want to share before we move on? Anything else?
I mean, I don't know. That's a great question. It's just like, just I coach just women, right? A lot of times what they would say is they feel imbalanced, right? Or they feel like they're not getting enough done, right? Or they believe in their skills, right? They believe they can grow a business. They believe they can be a good mom, but they maybe don't believe they can do it at the same time. And so that would just be a lot of, they may say overwhelmed, they may say imbalanced, but basically it kind of comes down to two reasons. And if we feel imbalanced or overwhelmed or whatever word you may be using or thinking you don't have enough time, it's because you keep saying yes to tasks, asks, and ideas, right? That compete with your true priorities. Or you have this thinking that priorities are more important than, and people have them like numbered in a hierarchy. And I like to say that our priorities are not more important than, they're all important. And so what happens is when we're feeling unbalanced or when we're feeling like we're not getting enough done, it's because we're letting go of a priority that we know we want to be hitting. We're thinking it's like the fifth priority and it's not that important. But then that's, even if it's something very simple as like a date night, and you're like, you just get that in, you just start to feel more and more balanced, then everything in your motherhood and your business also falls into place. And so I just like, it's a lot of just realizing your priorities are important, as important. They're all important. And you just need to make sure that every day or every week, depending on how they look for you, you're spending some time in each priority. That's when we get to go to bed at night and feel like kind of proud of ourselves, like, oh, I got it done what I needed to get done. And it's because we know that we were hitting time in our priorities.
Yeah, it sounds like it's you guide them on taking action intentionally. I'm not just kind of trying to keep up. I think about it. There's this joke by, do you listen to Jim Gaffigan? Do you know who that is?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
He's like, someone asked me when I have my sixth baby what it's like. And he's like, imagine you're drowning and then someone hands you a baby. And so I think about that with our business. Sometimes we feel like we're drowning, like we can't get ahead, or I'm behind in motherhood, or we feel that mom guilt. And so coming back to that foundation is your priorities, and then what are your action steps, and then following through. It's so much more like simple than we make it. And so that was so helpful. Thank you for sharing that. I'm taking notes over here. Okay, on the business end, and we'll wrap up here with a couple more questions. If someone is starting their own business, let's say that they're an online teacher or a coach, you've had experience with both of them. What would you recommend for their first steps in getting started? I know that we talked about belief. Okay, that has to come first. And then what would happen after they're like, I can do this. I'm going to create a six-figure coaching business. What would be the practical steps that come next?
I think it's still a little bit of mindset, if that's okay. It's just, and what I say is like, identify your strengths and then lead with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because when you hear all these business, experts and gurus, they're going to say, this is what you need to do to grow your business, right? You need to do A, B, and C, or X, Y, and Z. And you might follow them and you're doing exactly what they say. But if you're not creating the success that you want to create, if you're feeling a little burnt out, or if you notice some of the things they want you to do, you just repel and you just don't want to do it, right? It's because those steps that they're telling you to do are not complementing your strengths.
Mm-hmm.
And also they probably don't support your priorities, right? Our strengths are very much in line with our priorities. And so if they aren't giving you the success you want, then I give you permission or even encourage you to go, maybe these aren't the steps for me. But it doesn't mean that what they're telling you is wrong. I just goes back to my special education days, modify and accommodate the different strategies, the different steps, the different things that they're telling you to do so that you can create something that really aligns with you and that really allows you to lead with your strengths in both your business and your motherhood.
Yeah, that's so good. I feel like a lot of times we don't even know our strengths. We're like, what are they? So if someone is unsure of, okay, I'm going to start this business, I'm all in, but I'm not quite sure what I'm good at, is there something that you would recommend they do? Or I've heard before a journal prompt to ask yourself, what do I really, 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 really want? Or what is something that I'm trying to think of the other way it was phrased, that I'm interested in, or what am I curious about? And these are just questions to bring up things that you want to learn more about. But how do people find that their strengths? What if they're unsure of what those even are?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things you could do. You could take a lot of like strength finders tests and Enneagrams and, just like I don't even know, they're escaping me, but there's so many, right? That you could do to just start. But you could even just ask your friends, what do you think my strengths are? What am I good at? Or just notice what people tend to compliment you on. Because for me, right, I thought, oh, I'm going to help parents with special needs children, but people complimented me all the time on you're organized, you're very efficient, you're very speedy, right? Like all of those things. And I'm just like, oh yeah, we like, just because it's so natural for us, a lot of times we dismiss it. So maybe, so if you were to do a journal prompt, I would say like, what are things that you enjoy doing? What are things you're really good at? What are things that people compliment you on? What are things that maybe you could still be scared to do them or don't necessarily like enjoy it at first, like, because I think inexperience is not a substitute for not being a strength, but just asking her, what are some of the things you like to do? And then what I even say is take it a step further and like really pull it apart. And I mean, this is kind of a long answer, so I'll try to be really quick and brief with it. But lots of times we say, like you say, what did I like to do as a kid? That's one. And then you write it down. And one thing I liked to do as a kid was to babysit. And so if I said, oh, I'm really good at babysitting, I'm a great babysitter, well, then I should probably have stayed in teaching or ran a daycare or something like that, right? And so what I encourage people to do is pull it apart and say, what is it about babysitting, right? Because that's the box, right? That's the label we give it. But what did I like? And so when I pull it apart, I realized I loved to babysit all the kids, but the older kids I enjoyed most because I got to teach, and when I say older, like maybe the 7 to 10s, because I got to teach them how to like cook something new for the first time, how to clean or organize their room. I taught them how to vacuum or unload a dishwasher for their moms, right? We did a lot of sports and I taught them how to do somersaults and cartwheels, right? So it wasn't babysitting, right? It's I like to teach kids or people things. And then it was like I noticed that I babysat a bunch of different array of people and I really enjoyed all of them, but most the moms that were like leaving to go to school or college so they got a babysitter, or the moms that were maybe helping their husband in their business, or even maybe going to date night. But what it was is I loved helping them accomplish their goals, right? Because if I wasn't babysitting, if I didn't say yes, they couldn't go do the thing they wanted to do. And so I could give you a bunch of different reasons and pull that out. But what, if you can probably hear it, is special ed as a mom, now as a coach with women. I like to help them learn things they don't know how to do. I like to empower them to be able to do things they can do. And I like to strategically create a plan, right, to make that happen. And then another one is like, I was a competitive athlete then, and I was in some junior Olympic volleyball. And so I didn't have like a regular schedule. So I was able to babysit when I could work, right? It would have been harder to work as a, like an employee because I had an erratic schedule. And so even that goes to show like as an online school teacher, right? Or as a coach, I like to work when I can work, right? I like to work when it's convenient and flexible. And so it wasn't babysitting. It's like I wanted to help people. I wanted to empower people. I wanted to teach people. And I kind of wanted to do it in a time way and a flexibility that I enjoyed. And I know it seems silly, but I was a part-time school teacher. I was a teacher that didn't work on Fridays. And I was a teacher that like worked online. And so those are even in my teaching, which is like, no, teachers have this strict schedule and they do these certain things. Somehow I didn't know all this at the time. I was looking back, I'm like, I even created flexibility in my teaching jobs.
Oh, I love hearing that story. I think it just makes it come to life on it's not the roles that we play, but it's our gifts within that role. So whether it's teaching motherhood, I've done a similar practice looking at mine, and my gift I feel like is teaching. And I looked at it as a teacher, I looked at it as a mother, and I have high energy. Like the way that we do the thing is our gift and our talent. So, and a way of connecting people. And so it's so interesting to hear your story on how those gifts were there in each season, but you just kind of had to go a layer deeper on it's not the role, but it's how I show up as a teacher, how I show up as mom, or how I show up as a babysitter, like all the way back to babysitting. That's so cool. Thank you for sharing that. I think it was so helpful.
Okay.
Okay. Do you have top tips for those that are busy, they're mothers, they're wanting to build a business? Is there any top tips you want to finish with that
Sure.
for them?
Yeah. I mean, we talked about priorities, right? And it's not just priorities, defining your action steps, but then build your strategies and your priorities in your motherhood and your business from them. Okay. So that's like, we've talked a lot about that, but that's super important. But then another one that might be like overlooked is defining your business hours and really stick to them, right? Because what I've noticed, because I do work with a lot of moms as well, is they let everything else get in the way because they think it's more important than, right? Or they don't believe, right, that what they're going to do during that time is going to be as powerful. So they say yes to everything else. And I like to say, just because you have a flexible schedule doesn't mean you need to be flexible with your commitments, right? So really honor your business hours and believe that you can make a powerful difference during that time. Because if you don't, what I notice is like when women are like, I can't stick to my schedule. I'm supposed to do something from 9 to 11 every day. And then someone comes over or my kid calls or whatever it is. And none of those are bad things, but then they're beating themselves up because they're not getting done what they want to do. It's a belief issue. They don't believe that they're going to create that result, or they don't believe that what they do is going to give them what they want. So of course we're going to fail ahead of time, right? And let everybody else get into our schedule. And then maybe a third one is just perfect your strengths and not your weaknesses. A lot of times we think, oh, I'm not good at this thing, I really need to be better at. And I learned this again, teaching special ed. I always focused on the student's strengths. And when we focus on our strengths, it is easier for us to feel more successful. It's easier for us to try new things. It's easier for us to get excited about what we're working on, right? If I told a kid like every day we're going to work on that thing you can't work on, that you're not good at, it's just so defeating, and it's so limiting and it's so boring. And so we don't have to be good at everything to be a great mom or to be a great employee or to be a great business owner. So just decide what you're good at, what your strengths are, what ones complement your priorities, and then lead with those in your business. And let the weaknesses go, because as we build our strengths, the weaknesses will come up with us, right? As we get bigger and better and stronger, the weaknesses just naturally do as well, or they fall away and you realize I don't need to do those things, or we can hire out or do without in our business in those areas.
Yeah. I love the example that you gave with, and thank you for three of those. Those were awesome. I'm like, I need to re-listen to this. I need to take all of those notes down. But when you shared that your belief is this isn't as important, or maybe this won't be successful, and therefore I don't work on the business or I don't follow through, it's not that we lack willpower or what's that, discipline. It's not that we lack discipline, it's our belief system. And coming back to that example just really stuck with me because it's so true. It's coming back to what you believe is possible for you. Okay, where can everyone find you and learn more of your goodness? Is there a website? Share with us where we can find you.
And so Ceri Payne Coaching, it's CERI, although it sounds like the phone. And Instagram is where I'm most active. My website, Ceri Payne Coaching, Instagram, Ceri Payne Coaching, Facebook, LinkedIn, like wherever you find your modalities, YouTube, I am Ceri Payne Coaching. So just come find me.
Yeah. And I'll link it below the video too. So if anyone's like, I just want an easy click, I'll leave it linked below. But thank you so much for coming, for sharing with us your story, your journey, your tips, and advice for others that are balancing motherhood and businesses and all the things. It was so helpful for me. And I'm sure many others watching. So thank you.
You are welcome. Thanks for having me.
You got it.